てません。見えてます？
真面目な返しマジさんのクソメガネ。
はい、今メガネの人全員敵に回しましたから。
あんたなんかと喋りたくないから話しかけないでよ。
そっちこそ話しかけてこないでくださいよ。
Hey everyone, Sumo Spiffy here. We're back with our latest official Banzuke prediction, this one for March 2026. This Banzuke thankfully looks a little more straightforward than the last one, but we've still got a few points of contention, plus Aonishiki and Kirishima to talk about, so let's dive right in. As you can see, we've got everyone lined up in math order already, so let's start at the top. If you saw the instant Banzuke, the first parts will look pretty familiar. Hoshoryu, Yokozuna 1 East, 10 and 5. Onosato, Yokozuna 1 West, 10 and 5. Because Onosato did not do better than Hoshoryu, they will remain at these ranks. Similarly, Aonishiki, Ozeki 1 West, 12 wins. Kotozakura, Ozeki 1 East, only 8 wins. Aonishiki did better, Aonishiki will move over ahead of Kotozakura and become the highest ranked Ozeki. Kirishima, 11 and 4, but he was not going for Ozeki just yet, so he's gonna stay at Sekiwake 1 East. Takayasu, he had a winning record at Sekiwake 1 West, he's gonna stay there as well. Now, if you saw the title of the video, you might be like, wait, what about the Aonishiki and Kirishima information? And yes, now would be the time for it, so let's go. Here we've got a handy dandy whiteboard, and on our handy dandy whiteboard, we're going to write Aonishiki. We're not going to write it very well, mind you, but we're going to write Aonishiki Yokozuna. And what is it going to take for him to get there? This one is actually pretty straightforward. So he just had a 12 and 3 Yusho. The 12 and 3 doesn't matter as much as the Yusho. 2 Yushos in a row, it doesn't matter if they're quote unquote good Yushos, every Yusho is a good Yusho, will get him to Yokozuna. The only way this becomes even the slightest question is if he somehow wins with an 11 and 4. 11 and 4 is so rarely a record that can win a Yusho, I suppose that could call into question whether he really should hit that rank, but the truth is, when you get down to it, a Yusho is a Yusho. Regardless of your flaws during the tournament, you still got to the top of the pile, and that's really what they want. So 2 Yushos will get him there, even 11 and 4 should do it, so don't worry about that. But what if he doesn't get the Yusho? What if he only gets a June Yusho? Well, 12 and 3 is not gonna do it. We have seen this before. Takakeisho, some years back, he had a 13 and 2 Yusho and a 12 and 3 June Yusho. He got denied. If you've been in this space for a little bit, you may have heard the term Yusho equivalent or Yusho quality. It's where the wrestler doesn't win the Yusho, but it's considered evidence that the wrestler could win a Yusho. They did well enough that in most circumstances, that would be enough. And the fact that somebody else popped off even harder isn't their fault. That is generally considered to be 13 plus wins. 12 and 3 isn't good enough. You need 13 wins for that. So if somebody's going to be promoted to Yokozuna with only 1 Yusho, like Hoshoryu was, it's going to need to be a Yusho of some quality, 12 and 3, good enough, and then a 13 and 2 or better June Yusho. So 13 and 2 will do it. 14 and 1 will definitely do it. I suppose, so 14 and 1 is just going to do it. 13 and 2, I suppose, question mark, but no, I think that's going to do it too. Because remember, Hoshoryu just got that, and the JSA, the Sumo elders, have been very positive about Aonishiki. They've been very open about their expectations of him reaching Yokozuna. If he wins a Yusho in his first tournament at Sekiwake, and then his first tournament at Ozeki, and then his second tournament at Ozeki is 13, is his best record ever, and just someone happens to beat him in the end, they're gonna be like, nah dude, you're definitely Yokozuna level. Please, here is your rope, enjoy. So we are looking for Aonishiki to get a Yusho of any type, or at least a 13 and 2 June Yusho. But that leaves one more question. What if somehow, some way, he gets 13 wins and it's not a June Yusho? Like Hoshoryu and Onosato, they're healthy, they're kicking ass. They both go 14 and 1 and they fight in a playoff. So Aonishiki's 13-2 and he doesn't get the Jun Yusho. Does that get him there? And the answer is, I have no idea. It really depends on how they perceive a Jun Yusho versus not technically finishing in second, even though you hit that level that is, yes, you are capable of winning a Yusho. I have a feeling they would turn him down in that case. This is pure speculation. Like, there's no history that says, oh yeah, they'll totally do this. Like when I made the Trek to Ozeki video, that was leaning on a lot of hard data. This is pure speculation. Let's just, dude, get your 13 wins and please just finish second or lose in a playoff if you're not going to win the thing. Just make it easy on everyone. That will get you there. Kirishima, however, it might be a little more complicated. So the issue for Kiri is that he started at Maegashira 2. There he had 11 wins. He went to Sekiwake, and then he went 11 wins. So much like with Aonishiki, if he is Sekiwake and goes 11-4 again, no, that's not going to happen. Not a chance. Starting at Maegashira 2, you're going to need more than 33 wins. You're going to need 34 or more. So, okay, what about if he finishes 12-3? Will that get him there? I think yes. I think it will do the trick. There is a rough estimation based on history that guys who start in Maegashira, have an Ozeki run starting in Maegashira, for each rank into Maegashira they need an extra win. So that would mean Kiri would require 35 wins. But we haven't seen anything that tests this quite so precisely. Two guys were denied with 34 wins that went 10 wins, then 14 wins, then 10 wins. So for different reasons, they decided not to let that one huge basho in the middle carry the run. And then Koto Mitsuki, who is maybe the closest comparison here, he won a Yusho 13-2 at Maegashira 2, then only had 9 wins at Sekiwake and then 12. Kirishima's run here is going to look better than that because he had more wins at Sekiwake overall. Plus, as a previous Ozeki, I think that's going to maybe nudge them a little bit more towards giving it to him if he gets to 12 wins. One thing that I noticed when I was doing my Ozeki research is that guys who were dealing with injuries seemed to maybe get pulled back a little bit. It happened consistently enough that even though I could find no evidence that anyone with the JSA actually said, no, he's been hurt, we're not going to promote him yet, there were enough situations where guys with similar runs, the guy who had no injury history got promoted and the one with a recent injury history didn't, that I wonder if him going 11-11-12 will end up being assigned to the JSA that he is now healthy enough to hold on to Ozeki. Or I wonder if they're going to say he was injured recently enough that we have our doubts. I think the worst case scenario for him is he goes 12-3, doesn't get promoted, but then they say, look, just go 10-5 in May and we'll give it to you. So basically saying, look, you've had these 3 excellent tournaments in a row, so if you just do slightly less than that in the next one, we'll be convinced. And what makes it weirder is that with Aonishiki being an Ozeki right now, but potentially getting promoted to Yokozuna after the next tournament, I don't know if a promotion or not being promoted from him would affect what they do with Kirishima. But since that's a variable that we just can't predict, here's what I'm going to say. If Kirishima gets a 12-3 Jun Yusho, then he's promoted. If he gets a 12-3 without the Jun Yusho, I'm thinking like 75-25 that he gets promoted. It would really help if they gave him a target before this tournament, but the fact that they haven't yet suggests they probably won't. Could happen, there's still a lot of time, but I think you can reliably say 11 wins, no Ozeki, 12-3, Jun Yusho or Yusho, Ozeki, 12-3, no Jun Yusho or Yusho, we'll see. Okay, back to the Banzuke. So you may notice, and I did something similar with the instant Banzuke, that I have Atami, Wakamoto, Haru, Wakataka Kage, and Yoshino Fuji all set at Komusubi. This is just for mathematical purposes. This is how they line up in terms of having quote-unquote earned their spots in the Sanyaku. Wakataka Kage and Yoshino Fuji are not going to get there. They didn't do so well that they can force open new Komusubi slots. They're going to slide back to Maegashira 1. Wakataka Kage, technically he's earned a spot ahead of Yoshino Fuji, but they're not gonna not promote Yoshi. So Yoshi goes to 1 East, Wakatake goes up to 1 West, and that's fine. Now, Atami versus Wakamoto Haru. When you've got a guy coming up from Maegashira and a guy who's already at Komusubi West, and there's an opening at Komusubi East, the default is generally to move up the one who was already at Komusubi. Usually, if you look back and you see someone at Komusubi West who stayed in place, it's because everyone above them also won, so they have nowhere to go. That's what happened with Hiro to Umi not that long ago. He went 10-5 and was stuck at Komusubi 1 West. There was no spot for him to go up. Also, in the last 20-ish years, when someone in Maegashira gets pushed ahead of someone with an 8-7 record at Komusubi West, that Maegashira guy is like rank 1 or rank 2. Atami was rank 4, but 12-3 is awfully good, and keeping him at the bottom of the pile while moving Wakamoto Haru up, I'm gonna be honest, it just looks wrong. If I do this right now, that doesn't feel right. That feels like it's doing Atami kinda dirty. So I think he's going to end up at Komusubi 1 East. Wakamoto Haru is going to be a Komusubi 1 West. That's what I got. If you flip him around, that's not a crazy pick. It's just not what I think is going to happen. Getting into the Maegashira ranks, we've got Yoshi at 1 East, Wakatake Kage at 1 West. Chura no Umi and Fuji no Kawa are tied at 2 West. Now, at lower ranks, when two guys with winning records are tied, the one with the better record has generally been pushed ahead, at least in the last couple of years. In a decent number of those cases, though, one of them has 8 wins, so it looks like the Banzuke committee is saying, hey, you barely had a winning record, we're not going to push you further than we need to. But this is 2 mid-rank guys, not lower rank, moving into the Joy with 9 and 10 wins, and it's hard to find examples similar to this. The most recent one is from a couple years ago, where Gonoyama was 10-5 at Maegashira 6 West, and Takayasu was 11-4 at 8 West. So they tied for a spot further up, but Gonoyama ended up at 2 West ahead of Takayasu at 3 East. That makes enough sense to me, so I'm gonna put Chura no Umi at 2 East in front of Fuji no Kawa. After that, Hiro to Umi slots in nicely at 3 East. Daisho, he's next by far, but he can only go up to 4 East because he was 4 East last time and had a losing record. And after that, we've got Oho, and then the tie between Onokatsu, Kotoshoho, and Abi. Now, I've been guilty of moving guys up a little too far in the last couple Banzukes, so I'm going to take a slightly different approach. Rather than figuring out, where they quote-unquote should go, I'm going to try and see how can I move guys ahead of these two so that they stay at these spots or as close to these spots as possible. Well, Oho's already ahead of him, so he can just go up to 3 West. From Komusubi 1 East to 3 West on 4 and 11, that's really nice, but it is of a piece with some moves that they've done lately. Similarly, Ichi Yamamoto going to 4 West from 1 East with the same record, it's basically the same move that Oho is getting. Takano Sho from 3 East to 5 East on 5 and 10, very similar. Hakuno Fuji gets the same move as Takano Sho, still stays on the same rank just from 3 to 5. 5 and 10 only down 2 ranks. Ura from 2 East to 6 East, he goes down 4 ranks on 4 and 11. So you got Oho going down 3.5, Ichi Yamamoto going down 3.5, and Ura 4 on 4 and 11, which mathematically is 7 ranks. But it keeps Kotoshoho and Abi from going up too far. Do we have to move Tamawashi ahead of these guys? Well, no. So we've got Onokatsu, Kotoshoho, and Abi all tied at 7 West, and there's 2 slots ahead of them. So we can use these 3 guys for 6 West, 7 East, and 7 West and be happy with that. First of all, Abi is going to go ahead of Kotoshoho. Unlike Chura and Fuji, they were further down. Neither was in the Joy and neither is going into the Joy, and in those cases the tie has generally gone to the higher win total. So Abi ahead of Kotoshoho, that feels safe. But where do we put Onokatsu in relation to them? In a vacuum, there's a decent chance he would stay ahead of them. However, he would be only the 4th guy in the last 20 years after Kotoeko in 2019, Tobizaru in 2021, and Teirutsuyoshi in 2021 to go 7 and 8 twice in a row and stay at the same rank for 3 consecutive tournaments. However, for these 3 guys, if you look at the tournaments where they stayed in place, there was simply no pressure making them go elsewhere. In this case, Onokatsu is tied with Abi and Kotushoho, which does create some pressure. Add to that, 3 straight 7 and 8s at rank 6 is the kind of thing that the committee may consider in deciding how to set them up. This is definitely the kind of weird situation where they might put Onokatsu between these two guys, even though that makes the least sense of anything, but it makes the most sense for him to get his full -1 demotion, go to the back of the line, so that's where I'm gonna put him. Oshoma, 7 and 8, goes from 7 east to 8 east, he gets his -1, that's fine. Toki Hayate and Shodai, well, they were tied, but Toki Hayate had more wins, they're low enough that wins should win out, and Shodai gets his -1 on 7 and 8, that all looks good. Tamawashi and Gonoyama. Now, Tamawashi was at the edge of the joy. He didn't have any Sanyaku matches, but he is coming down from that general area. Plus, we've got all these -1s on 7 and 8, and if we move him ahead of Gonoyama, Gonoyama also gets -1 on 7 and 8. So it makes perfect sense to put Tamawashi ahead at 9 west, Gonoyama to 10 east. Roga slots in perfectly at 10 west with his 7 and 8. Shishi's 9 and 6 takes him to 11 east. Oshoumi's 10 and 5 puts him at 11 west. Forget about Fuji Seun for the moment. In fact, let's just move him out of the way. Nothing's preventing Asakoryu from getting a half rank bump. Same for Asanoyama, so they'll share rank 12. And now the question of what to do with Fuji Seun. But I'm not actually going to get to that yet. I'm just going to move him over to 13 east to get him out of the way. We'll come back to him. Chiyoshoma, Tobizaru. In this case, Tobizaru 7 and 8, we've got all these other -1s for 7 and 8 guys, and even though they don't necessarily try to keep guys with the same record moving the same amount, in this case, I think it makes more sense for Chiyoshoma to slide back up to 13 west. And then if we go to the bottom, because this one's actually pretty easy, my running assumption has been that Kotoeho will go to 17 east because that's 1 rank up on 8 and 7, and Fuji Ryoga would go to 17 west. But they are tied, and even though there haven't been many examples of guys being tied coming up from Juryo, turns out those ties have always gone to the one with the most wins, at least as far back as I checked. So instead, let's put Fuji in front, Kotoeho to 17 west, and hey, if that's wrong, well, we looked the data up and made the best decision we could. It's fine. Okay, Fuji Seun. Here's the deal. Winning records in Makuuchi have, of late, been pushed ahead of guys coming up from Juryo. In order to do that in this case though, Asahakuryu would have to go to 16 east and Fuji Seun to 16 west. And for lack of a better idea, that's what I did on the instant Banzuke. But it feels really wrong to me for Fuji to only go up that little bit. So I went and checked how often winning records in Makuuchi end up behind someone coming up from Juryo. The last time it happened was after September 2024. Nishiki Fuji was 8 and 7 at Maegashira 17 East and went all the way up to 14 West. He stayed ahead of everybody coming up from Juryo, except Chiyoshoma ended up at 14 East, a half rank ahead of him. Now Fuji Seun was 11 and 4 at 1 West, so it was if Chiyoshoma got this treatment going 10 and 5 at 1 East, that suggests Fuji staying ahead of Asahakuryu is possible. As it turns out though, this one is a pretty big outlier. Winning Makuuchi guys have consistently been placed ahead of Juryo promotees. Most of those winning records in Makuuchi are 9 and 6 or better, so those aren't too surprising. 1 year earlier though, Tsurugisha was bumped up 3 ranks on an 8 and 7, apparently just to stay ahead of the Juryo guys. We have to go back to March 2023 when Asanoyama was 13 and 2 at Juryo 1 East, Ichio no Jo was 14 and 1 at Juryo 3 East, and Mitoryu was 8 and 7 at Maegashira 17 East, to find the last time when anybody from Juryo got clearly bounced ahead of a winning record in the top division. 11 and 4 at 1 West is great, and by all rights he should be ahead of some of these Makuuchi guys. To me, 13 East makes sense, but it is probably too high. 14 East, behind Chiyoshoma and Tobizaru, strikes me as where he most deserves to be. But if putting him at 16 West gives Asahakuryu his normal promotion and prevents anyone from being over-demoted as Kinbozan or Mitakeumi would be, I gotta go with it as the most likely answer. Everyone else moves up a spot, and we'll put Kinbozan ahead of Mitakeumi since this also gives Mitakeumi his proper 1 rank demotion. However, if you think Fuji should be higher than this, then Asahakuryu moves back and we still have to choose between Kinbozan and Mitakeumi. Now, last Banzuke, I thought Tobizaru would end up ahead of Abi because Tobizaru had more wins. That ended up being wrong, quite possibly because one of them ended up having to be over-demoted. Tobi ended up going down 3.5 ranks on 6 and 9, Abi just went down his regular 5. Because of the over-demotion, they may have been less willing to do that to the higher-ranked guy. On that basis, if you think Fuji should be higher up than Maegashira 16, I would still keep Kinbozan ahead of Matakayumi. Just like with Abi and Tobizaru, I think they're more likely to over-demote the guy with the better record at the lower rank than to shove the guy at the higher rank down even further. So if you have Fuji Seun at Maegashira 15 or up, my suggestion is to put Kimbo Slice at 15 West and Matakayumi at 16 East. And that is our official Banzuke prediction for March 2026. As always, put your agreements or disagreements in the comments. Remember, Aonishiki merch is available at sumospiffy.com. Yuria is hard at work on the next Sumo kitten. I'm not going to say who it is, I'll just say he's looking pretty floofy. If you're a Guess the Banzuke player or you want to be, the entry form is in the comments. The deadline this time is Tuesday, February 17th at 6 p.m. GMT. If I recall correctly, the March Basho always has it one day late. Usually it's on a Monday. This time it's on a Tuesday. So don't wait too long and then forget to do it. Get your entry in. Other than that, have a great day and I'll see you soon.